Hello my friends, my name is Artur and I am an Estonian YouTuber. I am an Estonian and the video we're watching today is very much Estonian, but there's a story behind it. A lot of you have been suggesting this video to me, Estonian War of Independence. Many of you say, watch this one, it's really good, and it is really good, and I've seen it and I know it's really good, and I knew that I have already made a reaction of it. I always said, I already made a reaction of it, I watched it, why are you commenting it? And then I searched my channel and there's no video. Meaning that I thought I made a video about this, but I actually didn't. So yeah, just better late than never. We're catching up to the video. Let's begin. We're watching together the Estonian War of Independence. Sorry about the delay. It's Eastory's channel. It's a really good channel. Many times it has produced very interesting videos. I suggest you go and subscribe to them. The link's in the description below.
November 1918.
November 1918. So this is the true Estonian accent you hear in this video. My accent is a little bit changed. I lived 3 years in LA. It's mixed. My accent is like more of a mixture. But this is a true Estonian accent. So if you're interested.
Northeastern Europe. Russia has been defeated in the Great War and has suffered 2 revolutions that have led to the communist Bolsheviks taking control of most of the country. Their power is being contested by the political opposition and remnants of the Russian Imperial Army who have formed the White Guard. Many areas of the country are engulfed in a brutal civil war. The western borderlands of the Russian Empire have been taken over by Imperial Germany. But now Germany has been defeated in the west and is forced to abandon its conquests. German army prepares to leave the occupied territories as the Red Army musters its forces to begin the takeover. Meanwhile, many of the nations freed from the occupation don't want to be ruled by Bolsheviks.
All of these nations became free in 1918. None of them wants to be under Russia's occupation, under Bolshevik occupation. So this is a lot of different wars here.
And they prepare to resist the Reds. Lacking armed forces, effective government, and having politically divided populations, these new states attempt to hold back Red Army's advance. One of them is Estonia. All of Estonian territory had fallen under German occupation.
See where I live. I was born in here in Jõgeva. Now I live in Tartu. This one is Tartu. The most beautiful city in Estonia actually. Believe me on that one, it is. Very pretty. And yeah, now I live here. Both of these cities very close to the Russian border.
In the end of November, the Estonian government had only been in power for a couple of weeks and was struggling to gather its forces. Meanwhile, Red Army was assembling near the border. Among them were pro-Bolshevik Red Estonian riflemen and the Red Fleet. Soon, most of the German troops had left and the weak Estonian forces were unable to hold the line. On November 28th, the Red Army attacked Narva. With this battle, the Estonian War of Independence began. Supported by the fleet, thousands of Red Army soldiers overran natural defensive positions in the forests of northeast Estonia. Estonian army was constantly strengthened by new recruits, but morale was low and many men lacked the faith in victory and deserted the ranks. The next line of defense was established on Kunda.
Look how we're just losing ground. We cannot do anything. 3 weeks old government, we don't have an army yet.
River. By this time, the Estonian forces had grown in manpower, but the Reds broke through and captured the town of Rakvere. At the same time, the Estonian forces were preparing to defend the town of Tartu. On that part of the front, the Red Army was numerically inferior, but Estonian troops were plagued by low morale. Bolshevik agitators managed to incite some units to rebel, and the Estonian command lost the control of the situation. Tartu fell to the Bolsheviks without any resistance, and the Estonian troops retreated to the north. Having witnessed the lackluster performance of the Estonian forces, the Red Army command came to the conclusion that the Estonian army would soon be defeated, and they began reassigning units from Estonia to other fronts. However, the balance of power was slowly shifting in favor of the Estonian side. Despite of constantly being in retreat, the morale of the troops began to improve. Red Army continued to rely on its numerical superiority to push the Estonian forces back, but the strength of the Estonian troops was on the rise and the resistance intensified day by day.
I mean, it was literally day by day. Every next day there were more men on the front and the morale was higher and higher and higher. Everyone actually started to think that they could actually win the war and gain their own independence, which we Estonians did not have for hundreds of years, actually. Hundreds of years. And now there was a chance. We actually fought under our own flag for the first time. But people just didn't realize it yet.
On the 12th of December, the British Navy had arrived in the Estonian capital. They brought much needed arms, including Lewis and Madsen light machine guns, a weapon unfamiliar to the Red Army. The Royal Navy also captured 2 Red Fleet's destroyers and transferred them to Estonian Navy. When the Red Army units reached only 40 kilometers from Estonian capital Tallinn, they had exhausted their strength and the Estonian forces put an end to their advance. Meanwhile, the government of the Estonian southern neighbor Latvia had far greater difficulties. Latvia had declared its independence under a nationalist government, but the Bolsheviks enjoyed a far greater degree of support among the local population. Therefore, the Red Army's elite units, the Red Latvian Riflemen, advanced through the country almost unopposed. The Latvian forces abandoned the capital city of Riga and retreated towards the west. In the westernmost corner of
How do you abandon your capital? Like, why? How? You have to fight for it.
The country, they managed to establish a defensive line and were soon reinforced by German troops. On the other hand, Estonia was able to successfully mobilize, and now many new units were arriving at the front. Estonian forces had also received help from its northern neighbor Finland. By the start of January,
Finnish brother helping us. Woo! That's what I'm talking about.
the numbers of the Estonian forces and Red Army troops had become equal on the front.
It's weird. These are the smallest number ever. Like this 3,300 men. It's how much do you need to defend a small village, basically? 3,300. It's nothing. Like compared to Second World War, hundreds of thousands of men even died under Narva. They just died here, and we're talking about 5,000 men altogether, or 6,000. It's nothing. I don't get it. Like how can you have a line that long, a front that long with such few men?
However, the Estonian forces were better equipped. In addition to possessing light machine guns, they had several armored trains and had gained the command of the sea. Estonian army began a counterattack. A strong push by their armored trains coupled with an amphibious landing forced the Red Army frontline troops into a retreat. Their attempts to set up a defense near Rakvere failed when Estonian troops landed behind their lines at Kunda. The Red Army forces became overextended while attempting to counter the threat from both sea and land. Many of their units became scattered or were captured during the retreat. However, soon the front reached terrain more suitable for defense. The Reds managed to hold off the Estonian frontal advance at Jõhvi, but their position was flanked by a cavalry unit from the south and the
Cavalry! Estonian cavalry! Wow, I don't hear that much. We never had cavalry. The big cavalry times we didn't have our own country or army, so I guess this is the first and last use of official Estonian cavalry.
They were forced to withdraw further. Now the Red Army occupied heavily entrenched positions at Sinimäed Heights, which were
Yeah, Sinimäed. Sinimäed is the place where in the Second World War, I think almost like 200,000 Soviets just died in one battle. Like Estonians and the Nazis held off the positions and the Soviets just ran to their deaths there. And it was 200,000, and here we're talking about 6,000-7,000 altogether for the whole Estonia. The numbers are not very big. I am a bit confused how this worked out.
Impossible to bypass. Estonian forces broke the deadlock by landing more than 1,000 men behind the Red Army lines at Uutria. The Finnish volunteers broke into the town of Narva, and the encircled Soviet units at the front surrendered.
Finnish volunteers! Hey, Finland, my brother! Thanks to you, we have our town of Narva. I mean, nowadays only Russians there live in the town of Narva, but still, thanks to you, we have it in our country, not in Russia.
Now Estonian forces established a defensive line on the Narva River. During the following months, the Red Army made several attempts to go on an offensive in this sector, but they didn't achieve much success. Meanwhile,
the Narva River is the official Estonian border right now. So yeah, this is the border we had right now, 100 years later.
Estonian High Command was gathering forces to recapture Tartu. The armored train formations and Lieutenant Julius Kuperjanov's partisan battalion.
Kuperjanov! Yeah, I'm serving in Kuperjanov right now. Kuperjanov's infantry battalion, named by this dude who just beat the hell out of Soviets. Yeah, let's listen to it.
Decided not to wait for reinforcements and retook the town with a surprise night attack.
See, that's the school of Kuperjanov, and he's a crazy dude. He didn't wait for anything, he just took a few of his men, went and kicked the hell out of them.
Now the Estonian forces were in position to expel the Reds from southern Estonia. they directed the main attack towards the important railway junction of Valga. The Soviets had sent the Red Latvian riflemen against them, and here the best units of Estonia and the Red Army faced each other. With heavy fighting, the Estonian forces and Finnish volunteers pushed the Soviets back, and after a costly battle at Paju, they retook Valga.
Paju is the battle that Kuperyanov died in. Very bad. He was like, he's the true hero of Estonia, let me tell you that.
Meanwhile, other units crossed the Estonian-Latvian border and took up defensive positions along the strategic Rujena-Valga narrow gauge railroad. On the eastern part of the front, Estonians were faced with demoralized Red Army troops mobilized from the war-weary Russian peasants. These units disintegrated before the Estonian army's advance, and soon the Estonian forces reached Petseri, deep behind Red Army's lines. This threatened the Red Army's units with encirclement, and they were forced to withdraw. Now the Estonian forces had reached their national border, and their next goal was to establish forward defensive positions on land.
The thing is, this is our natural border right now, 100 years later, but we needed more land because you need a buffer zone. You just cannot have your border. Even with big countries nowadays, like Russia and USA, they want border countries to be occupied by them because they make the buffer zone so other countries can't just attack them. So yeah, as Estonians we needed to go into Latvia, deep into Latvia, to just secure our border.
Latvian territory. In the middle of February, they continued their advance. The Red Army had received large reinforcements and repelled the Estonian troops back into their territory. After the initial defeats, the Red Army's forces had been greatly strengthened, and now they were preparing to launch a large-scale offensive.
Wow, okay, now we're talking about more men. Yeah, it's still not much, it's a few over 10,000, but still 12,000 men, and then so they have 22,300 men. We have 12,000 men. It's enough because one Estonian can take at least 4 Russians. So yeah.
However, the Red Army formations in Latvia and on the Pskov front lacked coordination, which allowed Estonian forces to defeat them one by one. The Soviets in the east began their offensive first by launching attacks from the front and over the frozen lake Lemjärv. After their advance had been fought to a standstill in March, they were joined by their Latvian comrades, who achieved some success in the south. Fighting against the Estonian troops stretched the Latvian Red Army's resources, and this allowed the Latvian White Forces and German troops to recapture most of western Latvia. After having stopped the Reds, Estonian forces counterattacked and retook most of the lost land in the south. Then, with a concentrated assault carried out by armored trains, they recaptured Petseri and stabilized the front lines. Then the fighting was interrupted by the spring thaw. During the winter, the Soviets had been preparing for a major attack on Estonia and had organized new units. Now they were deployed on the front. All Red Estonian, Latvian and Russian troops on that part of the front were organized into a formidable Estonian Red Army. On April...
Look! Estonian Red Army, 19,000 men. We have 9,300. I'm telling you, like, Estonians are tough people. Look how we are outnumbered 2-1, almost, soon to be 3-1 maybe. We're still holding on.
April 17th, the Reds embarked on their most serious attempt to conquer Estonia. Due to the lack of ice cover, the Red Army was unable to attack over the lakes, and their attacks in the east were channeled in a small corridor and repelled. However, in the south, the Soviets' numeric superiority pushed the Estonian forces slowly back. The Estonian army had used up most of its reserves, and their defenses were stretching to a breaking point. Only some kilometers from Võru, the advancing Reds were temporarily stopped. Now the Reds attempted to break the stalemate by a diversionary attack in the west. There the Soviets lacked numerical superiority, but the morale of the Estonian soldiers was low. Estonian troops were deployed in Latvian territory, but they didn't have the will to fight abroad and were also exposed to propaganda by local Bolsheviks. The Red Latvian riflemen attacked and pushed the Estonian forces back over the national border, but they lacked the reserves for a follow-up attack. Eventually the discipline in Estonian units was restored and they counterattacked, recapturing all of the lost territory. Meanwhile, the onslaught of the Reds under Võru continued. Several weeks of unceasing fighting along with intensive Bolshevik propaganda took the Estonian soldiers' fighting spirit to its critical low. It was likely that soon the Red Army would overrun Estonian defenses. That's when a new force emerged. Since the beginning of the war, many former officers of the Russian Imperial Army had been gathering in Estonia with the goal of fighting the Bolsheviks. By the beginning of May, they had organized themselves into the Northern Corps, an elite formation of 3,000 men. On May 13, they...
Wait, so these are the Imperial Russians fighting on our side? Wow! History is full of surprises! Hey! Like, the Tsarist Russia was the occupier of Estonia, and Estonians don't want to be under Tsarist Russia or under Soviets. But still, the Tsarist white armies fighting on our side, that's really cool. I guess the enemy of your enemies, my friend, I guess that's the logic that works here.
They executed a thoroughly planned offensive on the Narva front. Their forces penetrated deeply behind Red Army's lines through unfavorable terrain and broke into the rear of main Soviet formations.
I've forgotten about this. Like, Estonian army, the discipline was, their morale was really low right now, and actually this white Tsarist Russian army helped us out, I see. They saved the day, so to speak. I never knew about this. They don't speak about this fact much. I guess they don't want to say that the Russians helped us out fighting the Russians. So yeah, it sounds weird.
In support of their offensive, Estonian Navy landed the Ingrian battalion behind Red Army's lines. The Soviet units, being threatened with encirclement, fled in disarray and the resistance to the Whites collapsed. Now, the Northern Corps reached into striking distance from Petrograd, the old imperial capital. The Soviet command could not afford to lose Petrograd under any circumstances. Reserves and forces from other fronts were scrambled together and thrown against the Whites. However, many of these units had mixed loyalties and defected to the Northern Corps. Ultimately, the Soviets mustered large amounts of troops and stopped the White forces. Many of these units were taken from Estonian fronts, and so the Red Army's position there became dangerously weak. After the Northern Corps offensive into Russia, some commanders of the Red Estonian Riflemen were coming to the conclusion that the Reds were going to lose the war. They decided to defect to the Estonian side. Estonian command decided to use this opportunity to capture Pskov. The defectors paralyzed the Red Army's command, which allowed units to advance quickly into the Red Army's rear. Many Soviet units got the false impression that most of the Red Estonian Riflemen had defected, and fearing encirclement, they fled without offering resistance. The Estonian white troops entered Pskov. The Red Army in Latvia had also been overextended. The German and Latvian forces exploited this by taking Riga with a surprise attack. Then the Estonians broke through the Reds' front near Võru and advanced deep into Red Army's rear, threatening to cut above.
Damn, for a moment it seemed like we're losing the war, and now boom! But all thanks to the White Army of Russia. Weird. So weird. I did not know this. Not gonna forget about that one again.
Bulk of the Latvian Soviet army off from Bolshevik Russia. On Daugava River, they linked up with Lithuanian troops, cutting off the Red Army units in central Latvia. The Latvian Red Army had suffered a major defeat and lost much of its strength. However, a new danger was emerging from the south. The German forces operating in Latvia had deposed the Latvian nationalist government and set up a puppet government consisting of the local Baltic German nobility. Estonia continued to support the previous.
Baltic Germans controlled the Baltics and Estonia for 800 years. Basically, we were the slaves of them, so no Baltic Germans, no thank you.
Latvian government. Many Latvian units loyal to the nationalist government were already serving under Estonian command. Estonian and German forces met near the Latvian town of Cēsis. The German forces consisted of Baltic Landeswehr, a unit of Latvian Baltic Germans, and the Iron Division, consisting of volunteers from Germany. They were well equipped, but Estonians had the numbers and very high morale. This conflict was seen by many Estonians.
Very high morale, very high. It's so weird that morale decides more than numbers in wars. I've watched many videos about battles and wars and armies that are underpowered 10 to 1 basically. Like they have 1,000 men, the enemy has 10,000 men, and they still win because the morale is so high. Morale counts much more than guns, much more than numbers. It's all about morale. And here Estonians have very high morale.
The Germans attacked a Latvian nationalist unit and pushed it out of the town. After the initial clashes, the military missions of the Entente countries attempted to broker a peace between Estonians and Germans, but the talks failed. On July 19th, the Germans continued the offensive and the Baltic Landeswehr broke through the Estonian lines. However, the advance of the Iron Division was repelled, and then the Estonians counterattacked at Cēsis. the German forces went into full retreat. Their attempt to regroup at Gauja River was thwarted and
Crazy, we fought the Soviet Red Army and now we're fighting the German Landeswehr. We fight everyone who wants to take our freedom. We fight everyone.
only on the entrenched
Sorry, we don't fight the Finnish. Finnish are good guys.
positions before Riga did they manage to stop the Estonian advance. However, the arrival of Estonian fleet in the mouth of Daugava River threatened to cut off the Germans' path of retreat. Under the pressure of the military missions of the Entente countries, they were forced to sign an armistice and abandon their positions. The nationalist government in Latvia was restored and continued to be allied with Estonia until the end of the war. Meanwhile, the Red Army had
You know, it's weird. Estonians actually freed Riga, basically, because Latvians didn't. They didn't fight this war. Latvians fought on our side in our army, but the Estonians fought the Landeswehr, and Riga was freed. But the thing is, Kuprianov and his soldiers, Kuprianov was dead, but his soldiers, his men, and, you know, the skull here, they wanted to free Riga, they wanted to march in here and free it. Latvians, fighting on Estonian side, didn't want this. And they didn't allow this because it was their capital. So for revenge, or I don't know, to be a bitch basically, the army of Kuprianov turned off water for Riga citizens for one day. It's just one day, but still they turned the water off to revenge because they couldn't walk in the city first. It's like, it seems stupid. I mean, we're on the same side, but still this happened. So yeah, weird. Why didn't you allow us to walk in Riga first, Latvians?
had gathered a strong force and began pushing the Northern Corps troops back along the whole front. The situation was especially critical near Pskov, where the Reds had large superiority. After defeating the Germans, Estonian units began to arrive to prop up the White Army's defense. Estonian command ordered its forces to push the Red Army deeper into Russia in order to create a buffer zone between Estonia and the Soviets. The attack was initially successful, but Estonian soldiers lacked the will to fight abroad, and their performance...
Yeah, I mean, morale was really high freeing our own country, but now we're fighting on Russian soil. We don't want to do that. I mean, we're dying for what? A buffer zone. We don't want to do that. So the morale goes down because it's not our land anymore.
Suffered. The advance of the Estonian and White Army was stopped short of their objectives. The Red Army counterattacked, directing its main effort towards the Estonian army's communications and its path of retreat. At the same time, the Soviets pushed the Estonians and Whites back from the front. When the threat of being cut off became too real, the Estonian forces abandoned Pskov and retreated to the fortified positions on Estonian territory. For the rest of the war, this part of the front became stable and only attacks of diversionary character were attempted here. The final act of the war took place in the north. Here, the Northern Corps had fought off the Soviets and increased their strength. The corps now consisted of 16,000 men and was renamed to Northwestern Army. Despite the increase...
16,000 men fighting under Tsarist White Army. Damn, that's a lot of men. The civil war was going on all over Russia and only this small area has 16,000 men. I mean, now we're getting to the numbers.
In strength, the situation was becoming desperate for the Russian Whites. They were in danger of losing their base of supply, as Estonia was in the process of making peace with the Soviets and the Allies were about to stop delivering the supplies. The only fighting chance for them was conquering Petrograd with an army that wasn't fully prepared. First, they carried out a diversionary attack towards Pskov, thus diverting some Soviet troops defending Petrograd. Then the main forces of the Northwestern Army launched an all-out attack on Petrograd. The Reds' defenses collapsed and the Whites closed their distance to the city. Estonian army had its own goal in this offensive. Their units were tasked with the capture of Krasnaya Gorka naval fortress in order to trap the Russian fleet at Petrograd. It seemed that the city was about to fall, but then Leon Trotsky arrived there and began feverishly organizing a defense. As the Red Army
Leon Trotsky bad.
Reinforcements were trickling to Petrograd by rail, the White Army's advance became bogged down and finally ground to a halt on the approaches to Petrograd. Now the Soviets...
30,000 men against 7,500. See, they need to have very high morale to win this.
counterattacked and began pushing the Whites back. The Northwestern Army, exhausted by continuous combat and having lost their hope for victory, began to lose its ability to fight. Their troops retreated towards the Estonian border. Meanwhile, peace negotiations were being held between Soviet Russia and Estonia. In order to secure a more advantageous border, the Red Army was ordered to capture the Estonian city of Narva. However, the Estonian forces had established extensive fortifications along the national border. Red Army attacked these positions in strength, but the defenses were well prepared. The battles here resembled the ones in the Great War on the Western Front. The Reds lacked artillery to achieve a breakthrough and took large casualties while pushing slowly forward. During November and December, Estonians and remaining Northwestern Army units repelled numerous Red Army assaults on their positions and were able to hold their ground.
Yes, we were able to hold our ground. Narva is ours, although only Russians live here, but it's still our city.
After the Red Army had exhausted its strength, a truce was finally signed on January 3rd, 1920. The Estonian War of Independence was over. It was officially concluded on February 2nd, 1920, with the signing of Tartu Peace Treaty between the Republic of Estonia and Soviet Russia. With the Peace of Tartu, the fighting in northeastern Europe started to come to an end. Lithuania made peace in July, Latvia in August, and Finland in October 1920. Poland followed in March 1921. So finally, peace came to Eastern Europe. It lasted for 20 years and then the region was engulfed in another war. We'll look into it in our next video. Subscribe not to miss it, and thanks for watching.
Oh, we definitely have to watch the Second World War, also how Estonians did. But the Second World War is different because Estonia didn't really fight under its own flag, because a lot of shit happened. It didn't fight. It should have fought, but nowadays history tells us that Estonia was sold by our dictator president back then, Konstantin Päts. You can argue with me if you want to, but Estonia didn't fight. I think we should have. Well, that's a topic for another video. This was really damn cool. I'm glad I found out today, one day before I have to go back to the army, that I haven't watched it with you guys. So now we did, and you get the video. Thank you for staying to the end of the video. It's a really long video, I know, but it is interesting, and I love this stuff. It's so thorough also. And Eastory is a wonderful channel. I suggest you go and subscribe to them. They make high quality content only. The link's in the description below. Also, if you do like my commentary on these videos, on all of the videos I make, head on to the Patreon and support my channel. It's the best way to do it. I don't have any other platforms right now that you could do it. So yeah, this could ensure that I don't have to worry that much about the material being of my life, and I can just focus on making videos without even just thinking about, oh, where's this or that gonna come from. So yeah, head on to the Patreon, support the channel, and as always my friends, until my next video, stay cool and bye bye.